It's hard for me to believe sometimes, but this is my 50th year in development work. During that time, I've seen many changes, some of them pretty astounding. But at the same time, some things seem to remain the same. In particular, how foreign aid for development is used and the way we as donors operate. These things haven't changed as much as we'd like to think.
You'll find pharmacies, but there are no medicines. You'll find schools where the teachers are there but not teaching in the classroom, and the kids are there but they're not learning.
I think often the conversation is not on the table in the first place, because a lot of conversations are about projects.
I think donors are individuals as well that are caught up within an institution, that have demands upon them. They have to deliver, they need to move funding.
You need a leader who has ability
to look for funding beyond what a donor wants.
The development paradigm is changing.
As a development organization, we need to innovate ourselves.
And let's determine, and where we can actually debate the issues much more openly. And I don't feel like what I say may prejudice the size of the check that I get.
In 2012 and 13, I was asked to lead an extensive research project on how U.S. aid and other big donors are seen and judged by local civil society organizations and the people who run them. In those 2 years, my fellow researchers and I interviewed literally hundreds of local experts in many different countries on 3 continents. We wanted to hear, really hear, what they felt about the future of foreign aid and what they would like to see change if they were more in control. Now I'm coming back to East Africa to see some of the people I interviewed then.
Good morning. My name is Victor. I have a reservation.
Welcome,
Thank you. Thank you.
These are people that, in my view, represent something new, the future of development, and perhaps the future of aid. They're thinking hard about the last half-century of development aid, a time during which about $3 trillion have been spent on aid, and much of it in giving things away. Irrigation equipment, medicines, tools, food, clinics, bicycles, water pipes, pumps, etc. Giving things makes it easy for us as donors to account for the money, and it has done things for people in the short term.
I have a vivid memory of a sensitization campaign whereby NGO people drove into the village, you know, with their 4-wheel drives. Everybody was called and we were all sitting on the floor, on the ground. These development experts were blasting about the fact that these rice farmers invested most of their profit in cattle and then held that cattle only to slaughter the cows during funerals. So these development experts explained that that economically it didn't make any sense at all. In other words, that these people were completely stupid.
We, the technician, we have misled the community in terms of how we implement the project. We have made the communities to be recipients of the services, we and the donors. We have told the communities that they're unable alone. And instead of supporting them, we have given them.
Can you envision having the very same conversation we've been having? Can you envision having that with a donor that you're currently involved in?
With some donors, yes. With a number of the more important donors, no. And we have tried a particular set of approaches, and we knew that they weren't going to have an impact. They weren't going to be, and we had found a different way of going about things. So we tried to broach the subject with the donor to say, you know, we're going to do the same things, but if we introduce this approach and this particular activity, then we know we have a better chance of having, you know, success, of having an impact, and for it to be sustainable. The donor's response was, tell me how this fits with our rules. Their rules are about, you know, I mean, it takes a team of lawyers to understand their rules. By the time we sit down and figure out how to defend the approach using their rules, this project would have long ended and we would have achieved anything.
What they really tend to want from development agencies, and particularly the United States, is know-how, technology, access, thinking, something that we tend to be very strong at, and that's employing us.
This raises the question, whose job is it to undertake development? Who is it about, us or them? I'm reminded of the expectation we had when I joined the Peace Corps in 1964. The mantra then was, we're going to work ourselves out of a job. The idea was that the purpose of aid for development, as opposed to humanitarian relief, is to help poor countries reach the point where they don't need aid anymore. But we, the donors, are still here, and aid has more than doubled in the last 15 years. And along the way, we kind of forgot the idea of working ourselves out of a job. And in fact, we grew as an industry that employs hundreds of thousands of professionals. I do think, though, that now the idea of working ourselves out of a job is coming back. Unfortunately, though, habits built up over many decades are hard to change. Dambisa Moyo, the Zambian economist who made a splash with her book Dead Aid, is still in the news, and a lot of people in Africa think she's right.
But if you look back over the past 60 years, where Africa's received over $1 trillion of aid, the issue then becomes, on those two metrics, growth and poverty, have things improved? And the answer is a resounding no.
Well, actually, your point has gone backwards.
In fact, many things have improved. Growth rates in many African countries have outpaced Europe and the US in the last few years, and poverty has come down slightly. But are these positive changes because of development aid? Probably not. It's those institutional arrangements undertaken by Africans themselves in their own countries and institutions that explain many of the changes. And yet poverty persists. If we want to know why, we need to take the time to deepen our understanding. We need to look at the political economy, the social structure, and the culture. As I said, complicated stuff. Development just doesn't happen in a straight line way. There are layers and layers and layers. Some move fast, some don't move at all, some move slowly. Wilson Karatu is a former civil servant who inherited a small farm from his father and began working it once he retired from the civil service. The way Wilson tells it, his father was so poor that he couldn't even afford a proper shirt. Mr. Karatu, who's in his early 70s, was born in the shed that he now uses to store some of the inputs for his farm. Mr. Karatu recently was the recipient of a biogas plant subsidized by the international donors EVOS and SNV. It's made quite a difference in his life.
Well, let me ask you then. You have other farmers as your neighbors? Do you?
Yes, I have.
Are they doing biogas as well?
There are some who are a bit far here, but the ones that are surrounding me, they don't have.
Is it because they don't understand the benefits the way you do? Or?
Yes. We have tried to teach them, but some find it as if there is a lot of work.
But you make it sound like it isn't very much work.
Yeah, me, I don't find it as if there's much work. But some, when they see me around mixing this thing, they find as if I do a lot of dirty work.
Do you consider yourself a poor man?
You cannot call yourself poor when God has showed you with something and then you can even afford to buy a car and drive it and fuel it. You can't call yourself poor.
At what level should we intervene? How ought we to help? If Mr. Karatu's success is as much about his own will and energy, which seems to be the case, as it is the stimulus of a subsidized biogas plant, can we do much about his neighbors who may not want to get their hands dirty? If Mr. Karatu can't convince them, how can we?
For me, it's getting that balance. Where do you get, how do you achieve that balance where they will say, okay, let's work on this together and let's determine, and where we can actually debate the issues much more openly, and I don't feel like what I say may prejudice the size of the check that I get.
So we're still seeing a lot of calls for proposals, etc. Some of those funding opportunities are very much about the organization responding to what somebody else has determined to be the problem and the solution. And essentially what they are asking of us is prove to me that you are the best organization to deliver the solution as I have determined it should be delivered. I've met some of those people that have actually, written up those documents, and sometimes they are very young individuals that have just left university or are even still in university. They have come out to Africa for the very first time, and they are writing up the calls to which I will respond.
It still seems as if we make the rules. After all, we say to ourselves, quite naturally, it's our money, so we can dictate how it's spent. The old ways, therefore, still prevail. Not only is much of what we do designed and set out by us, but it continues to be in the form of short projects, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years long.
I think often the conversation is not on the table in the first place, because a lot of conversations are about projects. They are not it's not a holistic engagement with the organization and a connection which allows the funders to exactly know where an organization is.
Short projects fit very well the donor's need for quick results and good accounting, but they don't fit the realities of development. Development is a long-term process, subject to ups and downs and changes along the way.
You will go and find offices which have pasted on the walls people's rights and service times, but they are not implemented, they are not respected. You will find lovely buildings that have health facilities, but there are no nurses or doctors. You'll find pharmacies, but there are no medicines. You'll find schools where the teachers are there but not teaching in the classroom, and the kids are there but they are not learning.
It's long-term engagement. That's the other thing about external funders. It helps to engage with an organization for a longer period as opposed to a hit-and-run kind of approach, which a lot of them do. When you do a 2-year grant or 3 and then you move on to other things, obviously you are not thinking seriously about what happens in the long run. So an external funder would be concerned about growing the institution, which means they can commit resources or even technical expertise towards governance processes, which make that local institution stronger. It's not about projects only. You are as strong as the institution that you have, even in terms of strategizing, developing a vision, a strategy, reviewing it, the environment changes. Like now the environment in Kenya has changed. So you need a strong organization that is able to understand the environment they're working in and that is making the necessary adjustments.
How many of the big funding organizations, bilateral and otherwise, are engaging with such reports that are already existing? When they come, they do their own scoping study. They get someone from the West to also do a scoping study. And because they're not informed on exactly what is on the ground, they'll just do a quick summary of what they could quickly get in town. And that informs big decisions with big money. As a result, only few organizations, and I can tell you, they're not all the most credible organizations, but those that could tweak or get through the difficult procedures will get the funding. The procedures, I think, they're too rigid in a way that even the dialogue is impaired by the fact that we cannot change our procedures. So you spend a lot of time talking about procedures and to what extent you can follow the procedures instead of talking about to what extent you can deliver.
I can recall talking to organizations that have had relationships and that have gone through what I think you call the organizational capacity assessment. And they've said, you know, we live in an area where there are no earthquakes and the land is very stable, and there's a checklist that we have to fill out, and one of the things is, do you have an earthquake evacuation plan? And if we say we don't, we might get penalized, but we don't have any earthquakes. So why should we have an earthquake evacuation plan? And I think they're pointing to the need to have processes that fit them.
Where you find that is where those systems are devolved to the field, rather than more Washington-centric. And I think that we are seeing that, and particularly under USAID Forward, under local solutions. And so gradually you start to build the track record for local systems and move further in that direction. It's tough. The accountability is hard. Again, we're a government institution, so we do have to uphold the accounting processes of the United States government. But more and more we're going in that direction, and it's good.
I think donors are individuals as well that are caught up within an institution that have demands upon them. They have to deliver, they need to move funding, they need to provide as much paperwork as they request for us to provide, and therefore the spaces for dialogue are limited.
So I think we need a partnership and an engagement which allows for conversations that are meaningful, that are open, and that are deep, that are not just superficial, and that are not focused on projects only.
It's an investment in time to listen. The time you are taking to talk to a whole array of people. You're spending time to ask the right questions and listen to the responses, and then interrogate the answers, you see, and then put categories of the type of answers and what those answers meant on the lives of people.
Are we really listening? Or are we just holding lots of consultations with folks and then telling them, in fact, how things should be done? Maybe they should be more in the lead. We should be listening more and more genuinely. And then the key question is, can they do it themselves? Are they capable? And do we really believe they are? In recent years, capacity building, or a term I prefer, capacity development, has been much talked about.
Most of the time, you don't need capacity building, where capacity building is offered. Most of the time, what you need is people to understand what's going on, why are things broken, what's going to get people excited to do things, and what will it take and who will it take to pull it together. But on the whole, my experience has been that what capacity building does is it completely strips a situation of all the interesting things.
When it comes to building my capacity in terms of putting me in a training workshop and teaching me about the politics of my own country or some of the, or what poverty means in my own country, obviously that's insulting.
Look, if you go to a school and see that there are children but they're not learning, your knee-jerk feeling may be that, well, these teachers don't know what they're doing, so let me train them to understand their job better, or their rights better, or the syllabus better, or whatever, what have you, and then somehow you think they will teach. My experience is that 99 out of 100 times, those teachers, if they're not teaching, it's not because they don't know how to teach or they don't know their job. They're not doing it because there's something in terms of the arrangements that's not motivating them, that's not holding them accountable, and they can get away with this low equilibrium, and they will.
We will give you some money to explore how to go about this better. We will invest in you to research the problem. We will invest in you to interrogate the problem for yourself and then come up with the solution. And through a competitive process, we will then fund the solution. Now, to me, that's building capacity.
It's not easy for outsiders to understand another culture. A lot of what we as donors think is going on is only the first layer. It's easy to stop at first impressions. To get deeper, to get at how the elements of the culture and the social structure and the political economy of a country interact takes a lot of effort. But it begins with getting out there and talking to people in different places and at different levels of society. We don't do enough of this. If we did more, we would find out how much more they know than we thought, and how much less we do. But as with development in general, doing this kind of homework takes time.
We have abused, and I speak as a Kenyan now, we have abused funding. We have abused a lot of the goodwill that came with development aid. It wasn't all goodwill, but there was some.
And so at the same time, the development agencies are struggling to bring the resources forward and having to justify that. And that requires them to be sitting, writing, sending reports, giving indicators, doing all of the nif-naf work that have to be done to justify a budget.
I appreciate that some of the donors in the donor community have to grapple with these challenges. They have to be accountable. They have to address issues of corruption. And I think a lot of those responses have been increasing the layers of bureaucracy and a loss of sight of impact and of positive change.
Of course there is misuse of money, and governments and organizations that take money from donors need to account for it. No one denies that. But procedures can be streamlined, rules can be simplified, and even negotiated between the parties. And certainly, with time, trust can be built. Of course, this is a two-way street. For their part, local organizations need to have the courage to demand a better relationship, and even to say no.
I must emphasize that saying no is a really difficult thing when you know you desperately need the money. but it's not impossible. It certainly is not impossible. I have said no and walked away feeling really liberated. I go away feeling like, hell, I don't know how I'm ever going to deal with this. But on the other, I feel like I still own what it is that we're doing. And that's, it's a tough choice, but we make it sometimes.
Every year, Ezra Mbogori organizes a festival to bring together organizations from 4 or 5 East African countries. This year, it's being held in Arusha, in northern Tanzania.
To get into the driving seat is to encourage, to stimulate, to generate a real interest from people themselves. So we're trying through this festival and through other related initiatives to generate change, the change in terms of regional integration from the ground up.
The overall goal is to create, or perhaps even to recreate, a regional identity. So issues of language, religion, the role of civil society, democracy, and of course development are on the table for discussion. And the discussions are pretty lively. Interestingly, the funding for this festival is all from local sources. We went to see some of the things that are not being supported by traditional donors. The Zinduku Festival and the medical school Hubert Kariuki Medical University in Dar es Salaam. There we saw lots of young people. They are the future. They care deeply about their own countries, and they're figuring things out for themselves. They have talent, they're serious, they're committed, and people like them are all over the region and have an enormous amount of capacity.
Napenda pia kuchukua nafasi hii kuwashukuru wageni mbalimbali walioitikia mwito wetu wa kushirikiana nasi katika kusherehekea kwa mara nyingine matunda ya kazi kubwa ambayo chuo chetu kimeendelea kufanya ili kupata wahitimu walio bora kama hawa walio hapa mbele yetu. Sitaweza kuwaona wote.
The teachings at Hubert Kariuki Memorial University is useful for work and also for personal life. To what extent you also instilled a sense of nationalism, a sense of behavior that really interrogates their vision as individuals and their service to society. So you see people feeling themselves as conscious human beings who have a responsibility to give back to the community that has made them achieve what they have achieved, you see.
Na aliyepata ni Priyank Changwaka.
Ndugu wahitimu, kuhitimu kwenu siku ya leo ni matokeo ya juhudi kubwa na nidhamu mlionyesha katika kipindi chote cha masomo yenu. Hivyo basi, kwa niaba ya baraza la chuo, napenda kutoa pongezi zangu za dhati kwa mafanikio haya.
They know what they want to do. Most of the time, they know how they want to do it. They certainly know their own countries and understand their cultures. They understand their world better than we can ever do. Of course, they can use some support from us. They don't want us to go away. But they need support from us that is different from what they are used to and from what we are used to providing. It's time we take a back seat and start genuinely listening.
It starts with us. It doesn't start with any donor. We will not respond to any requests for proposals. We do not do bids. Because then we are responding to bids of terms set by donors.
We really did not like the idea of external funders determining where we put money. We felt some of the needs of communities are sort of not noticed or neglected.
Saying no causes a donor to think.
Yes, I know what the donor wants, but if I feel this one is not what I stand for, I will simply not go that direction.
We need to learn to say no more confidently.
The development partner, I find, in sending this message, is not saying, I want more of your money, I want more of your, what they want is more of your time, more of your attention, more of you.
We need to innovate ourselves. You know, maybe the relatively simple levels at which we operated 20 years ago are no longer applicable. So we need to make sure that we demonstrate that we have, you know, a value to add.
Our partners want to engage more with us directly. They have a greater vision about where they're going, where they want to get. And I think that's what we see is this desire to have more contact.
Trusting our ability to analyze and to understand a situation, to work together across sectors, to bring together different partnerships. I think that's an investment in the right place, rather than investing in me to plant trees in a particular area in a particular way that you have decided.
Our strategy is built on their vision, not ours. When we put the strategy together, we had at least 30, if not 50 consultative sessions in order to bring ideas in from the outside.
We need the money from the donors, but it makes all the difference in the world what the terms of getting those money are.
I think if there was even a moment, you know, where that space was created to say, you know, let's just sit around the table and let's think again what we mean by impact. Let's think again what we're really trying to achieve here.
Janet Mawiu runs KCDF, a Kenyan foundation. Her long-term goal is for the foundation to reach financial independence. Not an easy thing, but KCDF seems to be on its way. Roy, who's Dutch, has been working all over Africa and Latin America for decades. Peter Bujari, a medical doctor, has been running a health promotion NGO for over a decade, an organization that has had at least a dozen different donors over the years. Rakesh Rajani is a Tanzanian, the founder of Twaweza, which means we can in Swahili. Karen Freeman, an American, is the director of USAID in Kenya. John Ulanga is a Tanzanian who for 10 years has run a local foundation and was recently elected to the board of directors of Hubert Kariuki Medical University. Mina Pabari is a Kenyan, born and raised in Kisumu in western Kenya. She too has worked in development aid for a long time. Ezra Mbogori is the founder and director of a Kenyan NGO. He and his organization are active not just in Kenya, but in the East African region. So what is the future? It would be great if the donors could change more quickly, but that's not realistic. I believe the changes are now going to be led by people like Ezra and Janet, Mina, Rakesh, Peter, John, and Karen, and Roy, and many others like them. The people we've met want us to change, but they don't want us to go away. Contact, exposure to others, exchange, dialogue, that's how the world changes. Nothing happens in isolation. We have a role to play, but it's a far less direct and hands-on role than the one we're used to.